Need to remember all of those that are on the sick list. Brother Terry called me at 7 o'clock this morning, and he is not doing good at all. So he said he was going to call the doctor tomorrow to see what they could do for him. So let's make sure we keep Brother Terry and Sister Janice in our prayers. Also, great to see Doug back with us after his little bout with a bad nosebleed last Sunday. Uh, it's bad when a EMT can't get it stopped. So he had to go to the hospital, and they finally got it stopped. And his dad, though, has had a setback, and also Sister Stabler is not doing too good today. So let's keep her in our thoughts and prayers. Keep Tim's brother, the Moody's. Holly is still having major back issues, and they're looking forward to probably doing surgery on her, but it's going to be next year. So she's got at least another month or two to go through this before they can get her any relief. And we talked to her. What day was it? We talked to her Friday or Saturday. Visited Saturday, Friday, and she misses everybody here and wishes she could be back, and says as soon as she's able, she will be back. So, and April is recovering from her knee surgery. Is there anyone that we left out? Rick May still having heart issues. Anyone else? Oh, and Rosie, yes, Rosie going through her rehab on her knee replacement, and Tina. Would that be it? Brother Hoagland, would you lead us in a prayer, please, before we begin? First Samuel. We're to get through chapter 18 today. Brother Terry finished up through 17 Wednesday night, but I'm going back up just a little bit on 17 to try to, make things fit together, or try to make it make a little bit more sense. When we get down through 53 of chapter 17, it talks about the children of Israel returning from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. As we've all discussed in here, anytime there was a war or a fight going on, the victor would take the spoils from the other, and that's where we're getting to here. Now, if you go to the Septuagint and start looking at things from verse 54 of chapter 17 through verse 5 of chapter 18 is not in the Septuagint. Don't know why, but there are some that surmise that it is probably because when this is put in here, it could be confusing, because if you just skip that part and go down and start with verse 6, then everything is just chronological and makes sense. But we're going to back up and do 54 anyway, because it's in our Bible. This is after David had beheaded Goliath, took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. So he took the spoil from the fight, but then he's making a present of the head. Is this customary or uncustomary for people to take the head of their victims? Customary? Is it still a custom in some areas? Even to this day, it is custom in some areas to take the head. And in verse 55, when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistines, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, thou young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. Now, one reason that they think it confusing and one reason they left that out is, why is Saul asking David who he is at this point after the battle? Because did not Saul give David his armor to go out to do the battle? He did. So he should have at least known who he was at that point. The only thing that I can surmise, and this is just purely speculation on my part, okay? If someone that comes to go and do battle, and you think that they're not up to the challenge, I mean, here's a teenage boy, no armament, no big weapons, all he has is a slingshot, and you send him out to fight, what is your expectation going to be of that fight? He's going to lose. So when somebody that you're not that familiar with, and he apparently just didn't know him that well, all of a sudden you see somebody coming back with the champion's head, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Who might that be that could beat this fella? So, like I say, that's just pure speculation on my part. But to me, it makes things make a little bit more sense. Questions, comments? Because anytime I speculate, I don't want to be left out on that branch if somebody's got a saw. So, right? But still, he was not he wasn't a person of war. He wasn't trained or anything. But like I say, verse 18, chapter 18 then starts out. And it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Now, before we start getting off the deep end here, this is not love like a lot of people want to put love today. This just means that they were bonded to each other. How many of you have had friends of the same gender that you were so closely knit to that if one were, Brother Gregory used to say that when he was growing up, when they saw either he or his best friend, that the other one was close by. So that's what this means, that they just had a tight-knit bond here, that they really cared for each other in that way. Verse 2, Saul took him that day and would let him go no more home to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And this is what he did for him. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword and to his bow and to his girdle. Now, who was David at this point when he first comes in the presence? He's a teenager. What else? He's a sheep farmer. He tended sheep. Did sheep farmers normally have very nice things to wear, or what we would consider today work clothes? What is Jonathan's past? Who is Jonathan? The son of the king. what kind of garments would he be dressed in? The best that money could buy. So Jonathan and David cared a lot for each other. So now Jonathan naturally is going to say, hey, dude, you need some new clothes. Give him his clothes. Give him fine things to wear. Give him good weapons. Give him everything so he could be with him there and not feel uncomfortable. David went out whithersoever Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely. I want you to hang on to that phrase right there. Behaved himself wisely. Because if you take somebody off the farm and give them a high position and send them out with great authority, what is one little tendency? Let it go to their head, be a little bit arrogant. As Brother Stabler and I were talking in the back this morning before class, and I can't put my finger on it, but I think it's either the last, somewhere around chapter 12 or 13 of Romans, I believe it is, that the phrase is used that they should not think of themselves more highly than they ought. So this would be a tendency, because if you look back, what did Saul do? Didn't Saul fall into that trap? Wasn't Saul very humble at the very beginning? And then he became disobedient, and now he's power hungry? Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Why do you think he was accepted over all the people? Me being military, and Brother Stabler and a few others in here that have been military in the past, just because someone outranks you, does that mean that you automatically are going to be their best friend, do whatever they say, accept them? Luke shaking his head. Even at work, you don't accept your boss unless they know what they're doing, right? Or they treat you in a certain way. That's where that phrase come in. I wanted you to hang into. He behaved himself wisely. That would be in treatment of others and how he did his job. Verse 6, it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. Instruments of music, y'all can pretty much gather that, and joy, but what's a tabreth? T-A-B-R-E-T. Tambourine. It was very similar. The research that I've done indicates that it was a tambourine is generally a round thing with some kind of skin stretched over it for a drum, and then little cymbal type things around the edges. Well, a tabreth was similar. It was round, but it had rods stretched over it that was kind of loose. If any of you, when you were kids, ever got these xylophones, pieces of junk you drag along, they were just loose pieces of metal cut different lengths. Well, if you take that and put that here, that would be pretty close. It would act like a tambourine, though, if you shake it or plucked on those rods. So there they were singing and dancing with joy. Again, that was a custom. The women answered one another as they played. What does it mean to answer one another when we're talking about playing and singing? Some churches do this today. It's called responsive reading. One says something, the other either echoes it or makes, it sort of goes back and forth. Saul had slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Now we know that they had not gotten to these numbers at this point, but verse 8 is the one that is key here. Saul was very wroth. And the saying displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. But what can he have more but the kingdom? So you can see where Saul, even though he wanted David to stay with him at first, play music for him when he was discomforted and things of that nature, as soon as people start heaping praise on David more than on Saul, you can see his attitude toward David start to turn. What today, and my wife doesn't like for me to mention her often, but I do anyway. She's got a saying, and if we see something that we like, she will say, I wish I had that and he had a better one. What does that phrase mean? We like what that person has. We don't want to have more than they have. We just like what they have. So here, but in this situation, Saul saw it as the people liking David more than they liked Saul, giving him more credit. And people in power generally, they have an attitude that they don't want anybody recognized more than themselves. Now, who makes the best manager? I don't care what your job is, but who makes the best managers? Who do people like the best for their boss? The way I always tried to do it, and I'm not saying I was perfect, but the way I always tried to do it was if there was anything that went wrong, I accepted the responsibility. Wrong fell on me. If anything went right, I gave credit to the people that worked for me. What does that do to a person? If you use that attitude, what happens in the real world today? How often have you worked for somebody or know of somebody that worked for somebody that the boss takes no responsibility for anything that went wrong? He's always looking forward to laying off blame on somebody else. How do the workers feel when that happens? Even if they had nothing to do with it, if something went wrong, what is their attitude? How much are they willing to do for that person? Versus flip it around. If that person takes all the heat off of them and gives the praise to them, because I will guarantee you, I have been in many positions before, and the people that worked for me made me look good. They did the work. So here, I know I'm getting a little off topic, but anybody got any questions or comments on this so far? I mean, we can sort of see how it sets up with Saul here that way. Saul eyed David from that day forward. So now Saul's gotten upset because the people want to give David more credit than he. And so now what does it mean if he's going to eye him from that day forward? Don't watch him. Yes, ma'am. Right. I don't think we have any information that he has knowledge that David's going to be the one, but Samuel had already talked to him and let him know that he was no longer in God's favor and that he wasn't going to be king forever, that there would be a replacement. But if it was this person or not, I don't think we've got a concrete evidence one way or the other. And two, you got to look at it that David here is just a teenager. Why would he be chosen king to replace somebody? So maybe not. Verse 10, and it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. What does it mean by him prophesying in the midst of the house? Saul was not a prophet. What was he doing? Pardon? Talking to himself, or talking to his family, or just making statements, but voicing his opinion. Okay, but he was, I'm sorry? Well, apparently because it says David played with his hand, meaning he was there to try to soothe him of his anguish. And at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand, and Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. So he apparently didn't just throw it once at him, he threw it twice at him. David avoided it. Do you think Saul was really intent on killing David? Yes, no? Maybe? Pardon? Well, nowhere in here does it tell us how good a marksman he was. But that's something to ponder on. But we know for a fact that his displeasure or his hatred for David was growing almost exponentially as we go through here. But he was very upset and he wanted to kill him. David avoided him twice. And Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Now, what was asked of me a few minutes ago, did Saul know that David was his replacement? And I said, we have no concrete evidence that could be or could not be. And David was only a teenager. If you take this verse and just stand on this one verse and leave it alone, then it would indicate that Saul did know David was his replacement. Because here, who is talking? Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and not with Saul. So if you want to look at it that way, when did God depart from Saul? When he disobeyed God. Samuel told him that he was going to depart. Saul told him that there would be a replacement. So it might be that he figured that he would be the next one. But like I say, I still don't think we've got anything real concrete there. That could be true, but if Saul had already put him in a place of prominence, and now the people were even on David's side, what's left? So it could just be a question of, well, what's left? So I'll go either way on that one because I'm not absolutely sure. Verse 13, therefore Saul removed him from him and made him his captain over 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. So it looks like Saul demoted him. He had been over the whole group, and now he was a captain over 1,000. And what would that normally mean when he removed him and put him over 1,000? That would now take him out of his presence, and he would be out with his troops. More so as we get down in a few more verses when it comes to getting a wife, sending him out to do battle. Well, as far as the authority goes, it's still Saul's, but people look to second in commands quite a bit when they look for directions on how to get things done. But Saul had made him the captain over 1,000, so that demoted him and put him out with the troops, got him out of the sight of Saul. But look at what verse 14 says. David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. So again, no matter what David's task is, he is still acting wisely. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. So I think his fear is growing, because if you put it in the human realm of things, David had been taken off the farm, so to speak, and was put over everything. Now he was demoted. So again, if you look at, and I hate that word human nature, because I think we created our own nature, but what generally do people do when they get demoted? They don't like the way things are going. So, but instead of bad-mouthing things, David, again, just acted wisely, took what was and made the best of it. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and came in before them. So again, the people are still on his side. Verse 17, Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter, Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. So here is where Brother Stabler was going earlier. Or was it Brother Fuller? I forget. I think it was Brother Fuller that made the comment that David was, or Saul was trying to get rid of David. So here, Saul is going to send him out to do battle, do the Lord's work, send him out to fight. A few books later, who else do we find doing something similar? David himself. What did David do? He sent Uriah out because he had made a mistake with Uriah's wife. So here Saul is sending David out and hoping that he'll be killed. Yeah. Okay. So in verse 17 there, Saul wanted the Philistines to do David in. Verse 18, David said to Saul, who am I? And what is my life, or my family, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? So David is still very humble. He says, you got an older daughter you want me to marry, but I'm still nothing. How am I to get this place of honor? But then verse 19, it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that he was given unto Adriel, the Maholathite, to wife. So again, Saul is not only going straight for David, but he's sort of picking at him from the sides too. He gives him rule over everything, demotes him to captain over thousands, promises him a wife, and then gives her to somebody else. So everything he's doing seems to be that he's trying to make David not only unhappy, but in the end get rid of him. Verse 20 though, Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, thou shalt this day be my son-in-law, and the one of the twain. One of the twain just means, well, he didn't get Merab, but you'll get Michal. So, and David loved Michal, Michal loved David. But how was she going to be a snare? Saul was going to give her to David to be a snare. How was that going to work? How about the fact that later verses is going to tell us, but Saul is now going to demand something of David before he gets to marry her. See, Michal is not involved in this snare business at all. She just loves David. But now, because David loves her, Saul's going to require something of him before they get to marry. Saul commanded his servant, saying, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. Number one, do it in secret. Tell him the king delights in thee. You're David. A servant comes to you in private and says, you know, Saul really does take a great delight in you. Tried to kill him with a javelin a couple of times. He's demoted him. He's promised him a wife and given it to somebody else. Tried to send him out in the middle of a fight. What do you think David's attitude is? Or where is David now on this? What's David thinking? He acted wisely. Very good. I think David probably saw through it, but yet David, being David, acted wisely. And Saul's servant spake those words in the ears of David, and David said, Seeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and lightly esteemed? David is still being humble, still thinks of himself lightly esteemed, even though all Judah and Israel love him. And the servant of Saul told him, saying, On this manner spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall ye say to David, the king desireth not any dowry. Okay. The king is going to let the shepherd marry his daughter and become son-in-law to the king. Custom in the time was there be a dowry exchange, but now the king says, no, you hadn't got anything, don't want anything. However, the king wants 100 foreskins of the Philistines to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So now he hasn't just given him a task of go out to war and do God's bidding. He has given him a specific number of people that he is to kill and bring back evidence of. And as the last part of that verse says, but Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So he thought by him having to come with this great a number that David was going to die, wouldn't become his son-in-law. And when the servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. So David didn't think anything of it. Why did David not say, wow, you mean I got to go kill 100 people, bring evidence back? If you go back to the very beginning when his brothers were around, his brothers talked to him like David might just be just a little bit cocky in his own abilities. And when he was talking to the king the first time about going out against Goliath, he was very confident. When he was in front of the group saying, why are you letting this Philistine come out 40 days in a row, 3 times a day, and chide you with these remarks? Why are you not doing something about it? So is there a difference between being self-assured and overly confident? Absolutely. I've heard it said before that it's not bragging if you can back it up with fact. So David knows his abilities. David has that ability because of what one major factor? I'm sorry? God is with him. When David went out to fight Goliath, what was his comment? God. God is with him. So, same things all the way through here. David is acting wisely because David has not forsaken God. God's still on his side. Verse 27, wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men, and David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full tale to the king. Now somebody look at 2 Samuel 3:14. 2 Samuel 3:14. And read that for me. Now in 2 Samuel it says that he paid 100 foreskins for. In this verse it says 200. How can you reconcile the difference? Bingo. The price was 100. That's what he paid in that second reading there. But here he just went over and beyond the amount that was required. So there's no confusion there. But anyway, he brought 200 in that he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. So as I said, or what it appears to me is each time Saul does something to David and David comes out on top, even to the point of Saul sending him out to kill 100 and he kills 200. Everything that's taken place so far, David is growing in stature and Saul is diminishing in stature to the point where now, even though David is married to his daughter, is his son-in-law, I believe that the word hate is not too strong to use here. I believe that Saul is, at this point, hates David and will do anything to get rid of David. Verse 30, then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and came to pass after they went forth that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. So again, he's still acting wisely, even wiser than all of Saul's servants. And the five that, well, I said five, I shouldn't have said that. The Philistines, the princes of the Philistines went forth. How many princes were they? I've already given you the answer. 5. Do you remember the names of the cities that they were from, the main locations? Gaza, Ekron. I'm not going to do them all now. Come on. Ashtaroth. Another A. Okay. Luke's getting up to ring the bell, so we won't go through that exercise. But that's all of chapter 18. And since he's up to ring the bell, any questions or comments on anything up through the end of chapter 18? I'm sorry? The warfare back in those days was very brutal. That is a fact. As a matter of fact, Wednesday night's class, Brother Clonch was talking about how the armies came out and arrayed themselves to get ready for battle, and there was the valley between. And I told him that was reminiscent to me of World War I, trench warfare. This goes just a little bit different, but in World War I, in trench warfare, there was a location, and it was Christmas Eve, and they were entrenched, the Germans and the Americans, so close together that the Americans could hear the Germans singing a Christmas carol. And the Americans started singing, and the Germans heard that. Well, it wasn't long before somebody got brave enough to come out, and then they were met. And then between the two trenches, they had a soccer game. Then they went back, and the next day they were shooting at each other again. And as you say, the warfare back in those days, it was basically trench warfare. They were getting that close together to the point they could hurl insults or whatever. They'd come out and fight, and then they'd go back. But I understand what you're saying, but even today, warfare is not pretty. Warfare today is ugly, and it takes special people to be able to do the job today. And personally, I feel like that our military today is the best educated, best trained, best equipped, best morale of any military the world has ever seen. So we just need to keep them in our prayers as they are out there keeping this country what this country is supposed to be. Any other questions or comments? I could add one more to that. If those in power, the civilians up there, would just give our military a task to do and then get out of the way, our enemies would think that the gates of hell had opened and Satan himself had them by the heels. So that's how good I think our military is. But little off topic. Anything else before we just take a break? Thank y'all.